Section 1. A Shattered Union. The historical backdrop. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 sent shockwaves across the globe. Ukraine, with its shared history, culture, and borders with Russia, found itself at a crossroads. The two nations were bound by centuries of intertwined destinies, yet the quest for separate national identities became increasingly pronounced. The dissolution of the Soviet Empire granted Ukraine a newfound independence. It inherited a significant portion of Soviet military might, including a nuclear arsenal. However, this inheritance was a double-edged sword. The Budapest Memorandum, signed in 1994, offered security assurances in exchange for Ukraine relinquishing its nuclear weapons. The Orange Revolution of 2004, a popular uprising against electoral fraud, highlighted Ukraine's internal divisions and its desire for a democratic future. Russia, wary of these developments, viewed the events through the lens of its own strategic interests. The stage was set for a geopolitical drama that would have far-reaching consequences. The following years would witness a dramatic escalation of tensions, ultimately leading to the current crisis. Section 2. The Orange Revolution and its discontents. The Orange Revolution of 2004 was a watershed moment in Ukraine's post-Soviet history. It represented the Ukrainian people's yearning for a democratic and transparent government. The protests erupted after a disputed presidential election, widely seen as rigged in favor of the pro-Russian candidate, Viktor Yanukovych. Millions of Ukrainians took to the streets, demanding a recount and fair elections. The Orange Revolution ultimately forced a rerun of the election, which was won by the pro-Western candidate Viktor Yushchenko. This victory was hailed as a triumph for democracy and a blow to Russian influence in the region. However, it also deepened the existing political and social divisions within Ukraine. The country found itself split between a pro-Western West and a more Russia-leaning East. Russia viewed the Orange Revolution with suspicion and alarm. The events of 2004 sowed the seeds of mistrust and resentment that would later fuel the conflict in eastern Ukraine. The dream of a democratic and prosperous Ukraine seemed to be slipping away, setting the stage for future turmoil. Section 3. Crimea, the Peninsula Annexed. The year 2014 marked a turning point in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, with the annexation of Crimea by Russia. Following the Euromaidan protests, which ousted Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, Russia swiftly moved to seize control of the Crimean Peninsula. This strategic region, home to Russia's Black Sea Fleet, held immense historical and geopolitical significance for both countries. Russia's actions were met with widespread international condemnation. Western governments denounced the annexation as a violation of international law and imposed sanctions on Russia. However, these measures failed to deter Russia from consolidating its control over Crimea. The annexation of Crimea sent shockwaves through the international community. It shattered the post-Cold War security architecture in Europe and raised fears of further Russian expansionism. The events of 2014 would cast a long shadow over the future of Ukraine and the wider international order. Section 4. Donbas, the heart of the conflict. While the world's attention was focused on Crimea, another crisis was unfolding in eastern Ukraine. In the Donbas region, a conflict erupted between Ukrainian government forces and pro-Russian separatists. These separatists, backed by Russia, sought to break away from Ukraine and establish their own republics. The conflict quickly escalated into a full-blown war, with both sides accusing each other of atrocities. The Donbas conflict has been characterized by brutal fighting, heavy casualties, and a devastating humanitarian crisis. Thousands of civilians have been killed, and millions have been displaced from their homes. Despite numerous attempts at a ceasefire, the conflict in Donbas has dragged on for years, with no end in sight. The Minsk Agreements, a series of ceasefires brokered by France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine, have repeatedly been violated. The Donbas region remains a volatile and dangerous place, trapped in a cycle of violence and instability. The conflict has also deepened the political and social divisions within Ukraine, making it difficult to find a path to peace and reconciliation. Section 5. The International Response, a Fractured World. The international community's response to the Ukraine-Russia conflict has been marked by division and a lack of consensus. Western countries, led by the United States and the European Union, have condemned Russia's actions and imposed sanctions on the country. They have also provided military and financial assistance to Ukraine, albeit with varying degrees of commitment. However, Russia has found support from some countries, particularly those with strained relations with the West. China, while not explicitly endorsing Russia's actions, has refrained from condemning them and has continued to deepen its economic ties with Moscow. Other countries, such as India and Brazil, have taken a more neutral stance, calling for dialogue and a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The United Nations Security Council, paralyzed by Russia's veto power as a permanent member, has been unable to take any meaningful action to address the crisis. The Ukraine-Russia conflict has exposed the limitations of the current international order and the challenges of maintaining peace and security in a multipolar world. The conflict has implications for global security and stability, underscoring the need for a new framework for international cooperation and conflict resolution. Section 6. The Propaganda War, Shaping Narratives. Beyond the battlefields of Ukraine, another conflict rages. A war of information and propaganda. Both Russia and Ukraine, along with their respective allies, have engaged in sophisticated information campaigns to shape public opinion both domestically and internationally. The internet and social media have become battlegrounds for this propaganda war, with each side disseminating narratives that serve their strategic interests. Russia has been accused of waging a disinformation campaign aimed at discrediting Ukraine, sowing discord among Western allies, and justifying its actions to its own citizens. The Kremlin has deployed a vast network of state-controlled media outlets, online trolls, and social media influencers to spread propaganda, conspiracy theories, and fake news. Ukraine, for its part, has sought to counter Russian propaganda and garner international support. The Ukrainian government and civil society organizations have highlighted Russian atrocities, shared stories of Ukrainian resilience, and appealed to Western values of democracy and freedom. Social media platforms have played a crucial role in amplifying Ukrainian voices and exposing Russian disinformation. The weaponization of information poses a serious threat to democracy and the rules-based international order, as it erodes the shared understanding of reality necessary for meaningful dialogue and conflict resolution. Section 7. The Current Landscape. A Shifting Battlefield. As of November 2023, the situation in Ukraine remains fluid and unpredictable. The conflict has entered a protracted phase, with no clear end in sight. Both sides are dug in, and neither seems willing to back down. The front lines have largely stabilized, but sporadic fighting and shelling continue, resulting in civilian casualties and widespread destruction. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 initially aimed for a swift victory. However, Ukrainian resistance, bolstered by Western military aid, has inflicted heavy losses on Russian forces and stalled their advance. Despite facing setbacks, Russia still occupies significant portions of Ukrainian territory, particularly in the east and south. Ukraine, while facing a daunting task, has demonstrated remarkable resilience and determination. The outcome of the conflict remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: the human cost of this war is immeasurable. Section 8. Global Implications. A new world order? The Ukraine-Russia conflict has far-reaching implications for the global order. It has shattered the illusion of a post-Cold War peace dividend and ushered in a new era of geopolitical competition. The conflict has exposed the fragility of the rules-based international system and the limitations of international institutions in preventing and resolving conflicts. The war has exacerbated existing geopolitical tensions, particularly between Russia and the West. The relationship between Russia and the United States has reached a new low, with both sides accusing each other of escalating the conflict. The conflict has also strained relations between Russia and European countries, many of which have imposed sanctions on Moscow and provided military support to Ukraine. Sanctions on Russia have disrupted global supply chains, particularly in the energy and agricultural sectors. The economic fallout from the conflict is likely to be felt for years to come. The world is at a crossroads, and the choices made in the coming months and years will shape the future of the international order. Section 9. The Human Cost, a tragedy unfolding. Beyond the geopolitical calculations and strategic implications lies the tragic human cost of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. This war is a humanitarian catastrophe, leaving a trail of devastation and suffering in its wake. Thousands of innocent civilians have been killed, and millions have been displaced from their homes, forced to flee for their lives. The conflict has had a devastating impact on Ukraine's infrastructure, economy, and social fabric. Cities and towns lie in ruins, schools and hospitals have been bombed, and vital infrastructure, such as power grids and water supplies, have been targeted, leaving millions without access to basic necessities. The war has also taken a heavy toll on Ukraine's economy, pushing the country to the brink of collapse. The psychological scars of war will take years, if not generations, to heal. The trauma of displacement, the loss of loved ones, and the constant fear of violence will have a lasting impact on the Ukrainian people, particularly children, who are most vulnerable to the effects of war. The international community has a moral imperative to alleviate the suffering of the Ukrainian people. Section 10, The Path Forward, Towards an Uncertain Future. As of November 2023, the path towards a resolution of the Ukraine-Russia conflict remains shrouded in uncertainty. The situation is complex and fluid, with no easy solutions in sight. The key players involved, Russia, Ukraine, the United States, and European countries, have different interests and perspectives, making it challenging to find common ground. Diplomacy remains the only viable path to a lasting peace. However, meaningful dialogue between the parties involved has been scarce. Mistrust runs deep, and both sides have set preconditions for negotiations that seem difficult to reconcile. Finding a way to bridge the divide and create an environment conducive to negotiations is paramount. Any sustainable solution must address the root causes of the conflict, including Ukraine's security concerns, Russia's geopolitical anxieties, and the need for a new European security architecture that guarantees the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states. The world cannot afford to stand idly by as this conflict continues to rage, with potentially catastrophic consequences for regional and global security.